2+2 इंडिया ऑस्ट्रेलिया मिनिस्ट्रियल डायलॉग के लिए ऑस्ट्रेलिया के दोनों मंत्रियों का स्वागत करना मेरे लिए एक बहुत ही सम्मान की बात है और इससे मुझे बेहद खुशी भी है। 2+2 डायलॉग इंडिया ऑस्ट्रेलिया कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव स्ट्रेटेजिक पार्टनरशिप के महत्व को दर्शाता है। भारत और ऑस्ट्रेलिया के बीच महत्वपूर्ण पार्टनरशिप है जो फ्री, ओपन, इंक्लूसिव और प्रॉस्परस इंडो पैसिफिक रीजन के शेयर्ड विजन पर पूरी तरह से आधारित है। दो लोकतंत्रों के रूप में पूरे क्षेत्र की शांति और समृद्धि में हमारे कॉमन इंटरेस्ट हैं। आज हमने बाइलेटरल और रीजनल इश्यूज पर मिनिस्टर पेन और मिनिस्टर डटन के साथ गहन और व्यापक चर्चा की है। हमने रक्षा सहयोग और वैश्विक महामारी के खिलाफ लड़ाई सहित व्यापक सहयोग के लिए विभिन्न इंस्टीट्यूशनल फ्रेमवर्क्स पर भी चर्चा की है। हमने अफगानिस्तान, हिंद प्रशांत में समुद्री सुरक्षा, बहुपक्षीय स्वरूपों में सहयोग और अन्य संबंधित विषयों पर विचारों का आदान प्रदान भी किया है। चर्चा के दौरान दोनों पक्षों ने फ्री फ्लो ऑफ ट्रेड, इंटरनेशनल रूल्स एंड नॉर्म्स पर कायम रहना और सस्टेनेबल इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ सुनिश्चित करने की आवश्यकता पर विशेष रूप से बल दिया है। बाइलेटरल डिफेंस कोऑपरेशन पर हमने सभी सर्विसेज में मिलिट्री इंगेजमेंट्स का विस्तार करने, ग्रेटर डिफेंस इंफॉर्मेशन करने की सुविधा प्रदान करने और म्यूचुअल लॉजिस्टिक सपोर्ट के लिए मिलकर काम करने का भी निर्णय लिया है। डिफेंस कोऑपरेशन के संदर्भ में मालाबार एक्सरसाइजेज में ऑस्ट्रेलिया की निरंतर भागीदारी को देखकर दोनों पक्षों को प्रसन्नता हुई है। हमने ऑस्ट्रेलिया को भारत के बढ़ते रक्षा उद्योग में शामिल होने और रक्षा उपकरणों के को प्रोडक्शन और को डेवलपमेंट में सहयोग करने के लिए भी आमंत्रित किया है। डॉक्टर जयशंकर जी और मैं दोनों ऑस्ट्रेलियाई मंत्रियों को महामारी की चुनौतियों के बावजूद उनकी भारत की यात्रा के लिए धन्यवाद दिया है। दोनों पक्ष एक स्ट्रांग और रोबस्ट पार्टनरशिप के निर्माण के लिए हाई लेवल एंगेजमेंट्स को जारी रखने पर भी पूरी तरह से सहमत हुए हैं। धन्यवाद।
May I now request Honorable Minister of External Affairs to make his opening remarks.
Raksha Mantri ji, Minister Payne, Minister Dutton, friends of the media. We have just concluded the first India-Australia 2+2 ministerial dialogue. This format is reflective of our growing engagement under the umbrella of our comprehensive strategic partnership. Before our meeting today, I met Minister Payne in the morning to discuss a range of bilateral, regional and international issues. I thank both the Australian ministers and the Australian delegation for their effort to come here in person to make this dialogue happen. As democratic polities, market economies and pluralistic societies, we have a natural bonding that has assumed contemporary relevance in a changing world. It was during the first India-Australia Virtual Leaders Summit held on 4th June 2020 that our Prime Ministers agreed to elevate our relations to a comprehensive strategic partnership. This 2+2 format is a direct outcome of that Leaders Summit and is pursuant to the comprehensive strategic partnership. India-Australia relations have experienced unprecedented momentum in the last 7 years. There have been frequent engagements despite the pandemic in a range of areas. New mechanisms have come up reflecting new energies. Our people-to-people contact has added a unique dimension to this relationship through the flow of talent, ideas, education and tourism. Today, as the four ministers come together for the first time, we discussed our experiences and further collaboration in responding to the COVID-19 challenges. Decentralized globalization, strategic autonomy, and a sharper sense of national security are some of the relevant outcomes. We also underlined our commitment to creating secure and resilient global supply chains. We welcomed the renewed vigor with which both sides are now engaging on trade issues to fully expedite the complementarities between us. As has been stated by Raksha Mantriji, we have had some significant progress in our defense cooperation framework, and we have set out an ambitious framework to further enhance our cooperation. The 2+2 dialogue reflects the comfort that we have attained in our bilateral relationship, especially in strategic and security spheres, based on the growing convergences with Australia on the security issues and a shared commitment to a free, open, prosperous and rules-based Indo-Pacific region. The peaceful development of the Indo-Pacific has been a focus of our relationship. Our two countries believe that it should be shaped by a in a participative and collaborative manner. We reiterated our commitment to continue to work together for peace, stability, prosperity of all countries in the region. This would include a rules-based international order, freedom of navigation in international waters, promoting connectivity as well as respecting the territorial integrity and sovereignty of all states. During the 2+2 dialogue, we also exchanged views on developments in our neighboring regions. Afghanistan was understandably a major subject of discussion. We agreed that the international community must be united in its approach, guided by UN Security Council Resolution 2593. As members of the Quad, we recognize the importance of plurilateralism in a multipolar and rebalanced world. We appreciate the value of our trilaterals with Japan, France, and Indonesia, and will hold these dialogues soon. The importance of ongoing cooperation in multilateral arena for preserving the rules-based international order was also emphasized. Our cooperation in the Commonwealth is important to that organization's performance. I also specifically took up with Minister Payne the problems faced by Indian students in Australia and those wishing to go to Australia, as well as the Indian origin community that is resident there. I urge that difficulties faced by students due to travel restrictions be sympathetically addressed as soon as possible. Today is the 20th anniversary of 9/11. It is a reminder, if one is still needed, of the importance of combating terrorism without compromise. Close as we are to its epicenter, let us appreciate the value of international cooperation to that end. In conclusion, I once again thank Minister Payne and Minister Dutton for their presence here in India today and for a very, very productive 2+2 dialogue.
Thank you, sir. May I now invite Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs and Minister of Women of Australia, Senator Maritime Security, to take the floor.
Thank you very much. And to Ministers Jaishankar and Minister Singh, Minister for Defence of Australia, Peter Dutton, to Australian High Commissioner to India, Barry O'Farrell, and the Secretary of the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, Catherine Campbell, and members of the media. May I say what an enormous pleasure it is to be in New Delhi again. Unusually for Australians, we appear to have brought rain with us. We intend to take some home because we most certainly need it, but it is, as always, no matter the weather, a great pleasure to be here. I want to extend our heartfelt thanks to our hosts for their warm and generous hospitality and their facilitation of this extremely important meeting between Australia and India. This is my third visit to India in 3 years, and I've stopped counting the number of meetings I have been able to have with my good friend, Dr. Jaishankar, many of them face-to-face, perhaps too many of them virtual. And we look forward to escaping the confines of COVID-19 to ensure that those face-to-face meetings and international engagements can continue. That strong engagement, though, speaks to the powerful momentum in the relationship between our two nations. And it is an important step today, with the 2+2 meeting marking another success stemming from our comprehensive strategic partnership and from the undertakings that we are pursuing. Australia and India share a positive vision of a free, open, secure, inclusive Indo-Pacific. As maritime powers and outward-looking democracies in the Indo-Pacific, our cooperation is essential. We've talked today about many things, but including the strong and enduring Australia-India relationships in trade, in community links, in cyber and climate and defence. We have shared views on the challenges of the East China and South China Seas, of Myanmar and of Afghanistan. Last month did see the fall of Kabul. And along with the ongoing fight of terrorism, the future of Afghanistan remains a central concern to both of our countries. Both of our countries have been the victims of appalling terrorist attacks. And this day, the 11th of September, will be forever remembered for those terrible events of 20 years ago, when terrorism struck at the heart of our friend, the United States, and by extension also our modern, pluralist and democratic world. It's fitting that Minister Dutton and I should be here on this anniversary with such an important democratic partner. Ours is a relationship that supports stability and the rules-based order, a relationship that is based on the long-standing commonalities but is also full of vitality and promise. And I am very glad to be here today to see us take it forward another very important step. Thank you.
May I now request Honourable Minister of Defence of Australia, Mr. Peter Dutton, to take the floor.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you, Maurice, for your words. It's been a great honour for Minister Payne and myself to be here in the distinguished company of Minister Jaishankar. Thank you very much, and also to Minister Singh, two good friends and two wonderful people for the relationship. I too want to start today by acknowledging the 20-year anniversary of 9/11 and acknowledge that many people will still be suffering the loss of a loved one, and let it always be a reminder to us of the human cost of the barbaric acts of terrorism, which, as Minister Payne points out, we see not only in the United States but in our own countries and indeed in regions across the world. And it's part of the reason why this relationship is so important and why we rededicate ourselves to the values that we share, and that was reflected in the discussions today. Our discussions have been incredibly productive, and from a year on, since the Prime Ministers Morrison and Modi signed the Comprehensive Strategic Partnership, Australia and India's defence relationship is at an historic high. It has been a great pleasure, Minister Singh, to spend time with you, and I thank you very much for your engagement. I want to acknowledge your dedication in advancing the Indo-Australian Defence and Security Partnership, and I too am equally committed to this partnership and to this endeavour. India is a rising Indo-Pacific great power and an increasingly significant security partner for Australia, particularly in the maritime domain. We both depend on free and open access to sea lanes in the Indo-Pacific for our trade and economic well-being. And we share an unwavering commitment to upholding the rules-based international order and ensuring the Indo-Pacific is open, inclusive and indeed prosperous. As our nations contend with an increasingly complex and uncertain region, the friendship and partnership between our two nations is essential for helping to ensure our region is secure and stable. And in this vein, I've been incredibly pleased to see the growth in joint exercises and activities between our armed forces, despite the challenges of COVID-19. As we speak, ships from our navies are exercising together off the coast of Australia's Northern Territory as part of AUSINDEX, our two nations' biannual bilateral naval exercise. Furthermore, we continue to collaborate in other areas like defence science and technology, and importantly, cyber security. Our mutual logistics support arrangement enabled Australia to airlift oxygen to India and support its response to the pandemic. Such activities are paving the way for deeper and more sophisticated operational cooperation between our two nations. Today, Minister Singh and I agreed to several initiatives to further our strong defence relationship and to drive greater practical engagement between our armed forces. Australia will invite India to participate in exercise Talisman Sabre, and to continue to support Indo-Pacific endeavour, as we saw earlier this week. Australia will continue to participate in India's exercise Malabar with the United States and Japan. Australia and India have agreed to reinforce each other's maritime domain awareness through increased information sharing and indeed practical cooperation. And finally, Australia will increase its defence diplomatic representation here in New Delhi, a very significant and historic step to support closer coordination on Indian-Pacific maritime security and greater information sharing. This meeting was a vital opportunity to discuss practical ways to reinforce our comprehensive strategic partnership, deepen our interoperability and bolster our defence cooperation. I look forward very much to continued close engagement with Minister Singh. I thank the Indian government for the warm hospitality that's been extended to Maurice and I thank you for your friendship, which continues to grow on each of these occasions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ministers, for your opening remarks. We will now take a few questions from friends of the media. Given time constraints, we'll limit that to 4. May I begin? The first question from Ms. Vinita Pandey from Asian Age, please.
My question is to Dr. Jaishankar. Sir, you mentioned that Afghanistan was discussed, so maybe you can give us some idea to what extent Afghanistan was discussed, and is there going to be a common approach between India and Australia in dealing with the problems emanating from Afghanistan region?
Well, I think if your question is about a common approach, Minister Payne should have an equal shot at an answer. But what I can say is that we had a very detailed exchange of views, and our approach is very similar. In a way, it is summed up by the UN Security Council Resolution 2593, which emphasizes most of all that Afghanistan must not allow its soil to be used in any manner by anybody for terrorism. But apart from that, there were issues of concern about the inclusiveness of the dispensation, concerns about treatment of women and minorities, matters related to travel of Afghans, issues regarding humanitarian assistance. So it is an evolving situation. I think it was a good exchange of notes, but I think perhaps Minister Payne would like to speak for Australia's position.
Thank you, Dr. Jaishankar, and thank you for the question. We do share very strong interests in ensuring that Afghanistan never again becomes a safe haven for the breeding or the training of terrorists. And that is an abiding concern of the international community. For Australia's part, we're also very focused on seeking safe passage for those in Afghanistan, citizens, foreign nationals, visa holders of other countries who seek to leave Afghanistan. And we have urged that they be allowed to leave safely, and that means are available for them to do so. We're very conscious of the impact of violence and breaches of human rights on the Afghanistan community, and again would call for those human rights, fundamental human rights, to be observed. Humanitarian assistance will be a very important focus for the international community. We know that not only the recent events will have exacerbated any issues that were already being dealt with, but the ongoing drought, the significant internal and external displacement of citizens, the need for the World Food Programme, the UNHCR, the International Organisation for Migration, to be allowed unimpeded and safe access to provide humanitarian support is something which is very front of mind for Australia and for the international community. And I would also strongly reinforce Australia's views in relation to the position of women and girls. For 20 years, we have worked with the international community and the people of Afghanistan to ensure that the circumstances for women and girls in relation to education, participation in the workforce, the protection of their basic rights were preserved and in fact allowed to grow. And there are many women and girls who attest to the achievements of those 2 decades, and Australia stands with other members of the international community in seeking to ensure that that is not wound back, and the participation of women and girls in their own right, in a just way in the community, is allowed to continue.
Thank you. The next question I'll have Manas from PTI.
Good afternoon, Ministers. The 2+2 inaugural talks took place at a very, very crucial time when the region is witnessing unsettled geopolitical flux, including developments in Afghanistan, as well as our growing convergence among the Quad member countries in the Indo-Pacific region. Considering the deepening of Australia and India's defense cooperation, Rajnath Singh ji, how do you see the India-Australia defense cooperation going forward in the next 5 to 6 years? Thank you.
मैं कह सकता हूं कि हाल के वर्षों में भारत और ऑस्ट्रेलिया के बीच बाइलेटरल डिफेंस कोऑपरेशंस जो है काफी मजबूत हुए हैं, और भारत और ऑस्ट्रेलिया के बीच जो यह कोऑपरेशन अथवा जो यह बाइलेटरल रिलेशन है वो सही दिशा में जा रहा है, और इसमें रिमार्केबल प्रोग्रेस हुई है विगत कुछ वर्षों में, यह भी मैं कह सकता हूं। जून 2020 में जो प्रधानमंत्री मोदी जी और प्रधानमंत्री ऑस्ट्रेलिया मिस्टर मॉरिसन के बीच वर्चुअल लीडर समिट हुई थी, उसके दौरान इस रिश्ते को एक कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव स्ट्रेटेजिक पार्टनरशिप तक आगे बढ़ाने और एक बढ़ाने का इसे मेजर माइलस्टोन मैं मानता हूं, ऐसा रहा है। मैं मंत्री पीटर डटन को हमारी बढ़ते पार्टनरशिप को आगे बढ़ाने में उनकी जो व्यक्तिगत रुचि रही है, जो पर्सनल इंटरेस्ट उन्होंने लिया है, इसके लिए भी मैं उनको धन्यवाद देता हूं, और इसके लिए उन्हें मैं अपनी तरफ से बधाई भी देना चाहता हूं। भारत और ऑस्ट्रेलिया के पीसफुल, कोऑपरेटिव और प्रॉस्परस इंडो पैसिफिक रीजन में हम दोनों के साझा हित हैं, और यह साझेदारी एक फ्री, ओपन, इंक्लूसिव और रूल बेस्ड इंडो पैसिफिक रीजन के विजन पर पूरी तरह से आधारित है, और हमारे उभरते हुए कोऑपरेशंस में ग्रेटर मिलिट्री एंगेजमेंट्स, बेटर इंफॉर्मेशन शेयरिंग और इमर्जिंग डिफेंस टेक्नोलॉजीज में कोऑपरेशन और म्यूचुअल लॉजिस्टिक सपोर्ट, यह सब सारी संभावनाएं स्पष्ट रूप से दिखाई देती हैं। हमने भारत की लिबरलाइज्ड फॉरेन डायरेक्ट इन्वेस्टमेंट पॉलिसीज का लाभ उठाने के लिए ऑस्ट्रेलियन इंडस्ट्री को भी आमंत्रित किया है, और हम पूरे क्षेत्र की सुरक्षा और विकास के लिए ऑस्ट्रेलिया के साथ एक मजबूत साझेदारी बनाने के लिए भी पूरी तरह से हम कमिटेड हैं, और मैं इस साझेदारी को और अधिक हाइट देना चाहता हूं और अधिक ऊंचाई पर ले जाना चाहता हूं। थैंक यू वेरी मच।
Would Minister Dutton also like to add to that?
Thank you. Well, first I endorse the words of Minister Singh. I think the outlook and the desire for both of our countries is to see remaining peace and prosperity in our region, and India enjoys the economic success that it does today, and Australia enjoys the economic success that we do because of the prevailing peace in our region. The Indo-Pacific is a complex area, and increasingly so. Neither Australia nor India are aggressive nations. We stand for our values, and we work very closely together because our values align, and we want for our countries, as we want for other countries in the region, a very bright future. And it's why we shouldn't take what we have for granted, or what we've been able to build up since the end of the Second World War in our part of the world. We need to make sure that that peace prevails, and that's the cause that we dedicate ourselves to. And so the arrangements between our respective defence agencies is more important than ever. Sharing of that intelligence, the maritime operations, the ability to form those people-to-people links, the shared arrangements in terms of facilities, and understanding the better ways in which we can operate together to reach beyond our normal areas of influence. These are all very important areas of pursuit in the relationship, and I commend the leadership under Minister Singh and the General and Secretary Kumar and others for that work and the engagement with Australia, because we're dedicated to making sure that peace continues in our region and that our countries can continue to thrive and to prosper.
Thank you, sir. For the third question, may I invite Manish Jha of TV9 to the microphone.
Thank you, sir. Sir, my question to both sides, my question to Honorable EM also, that since India and Australia both are member of Quad, and China calls Quad as Asian NATO, so what is your response?
Well, I think my response would be that we call ourselves Quad, and Quad is a platform where 4 countries have come to cooperate for their benefit and for the benefit of the world. I think a term like NATO is very much a Cold War term, looking back. I think Quad looks in the future. It reflects globalization. It reflects the compulsions of countries to work together. And if you look at the kind of issues Quad is focused on today, vaccines, supply chains, education, connectivity, I can't see any relationship between such issues and NATO or any other kind of organizations like that. So I think it's important not to misrepresent what is the reality out there.
Thank you. I think Jay has explained it and articulated that response extremely well, if I may say. And it's certainly the case that as Australia and India have re-energised relations, there is also the opportunity to work through smaller groups like the Quad and other pieces of regional architecture like the East Asia Summit, the ASEAN Regional Forum, for example. Quad members are champions of ASEAN centrality. We actively engage in that ASEAN-led architecture. We're committed to supporting the practical implementation of the ASEAN outlook on the Indo-Pacific. I'd also say that we have a positive and practical agenda. Minister Jaishankar has mentioned a number of those initiatives around vaccines, around climate, around critical technology, also trying to address some of the dangerous disinformation that pervades the world's experience in relation to the pandemic. So our constructive engagement in an informal diplomatic network is overwhelmingly about contributing positively for that open, inclusive and resilient region in which we all want to live.
Thank you. And from final question, may I request Maha Siddiqui there at CNN News 18.
Hi, I'm Maha Siddiqui from CNN News 18. My question is for both External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar and the Australian Foreign Minister. COVID has changed a lot, but we're all learning to live in the new normal. But there's a lot of frustration and problems for Indian students who want to travel to Australia, and because of restrictions, they haven't been able to do so. Was that matter taken up by the Indian side? And the Australian side, has there been any reassurance as to when things can be eased out?
Can I go first?
You may.
Well, yes, we hear a lot from the students, and I think their frustrations, their feelings are completely understandable. Many of them would like to be at the institutions that they are already studying in or want to study in. So we discussed it in some detail today. Minister Payne, who will, of course, speak for herself, shared with me what is Australia's thinking about when students would be able to come. But certainly, and I say this not just for Australia, I think we've been having some problems with some other countries as well. We had initially with the US, we're still having some issues with Canada. So I do want the students of the country and the parents of the students to know that it is something we take as a very high priority, and take up very, very vigorously with our foreign partners. But Minister Payne would like to perhaps speak about Australia's thinking.
Thank you. I would. I live and work in Western Sydney, and I am one of the most enthusiastic proponents of welcoming our much-loved Indian students back into the Australian education system as soon as it is possible for us to do so. The diaspora is and the student body is very present where I live and where I work, and we miss that engagement sincerely. There are still over 60,000 Indian students in Australia, but I do definitely understand the desire that those students and their families who are not able to be there have, that desire they have for the on-campus experience, the in-country life, and it is, of course, very difficult. The COVID restrictions have impacted travel to and from Australia, not just for the sorts of students that you raise, for Australians themselves, and in fact for ministers like Minister Dutton and I. We are required to comply with the same sort of quarantine restrictions and health requirements as all incoming travellers, as you would expect. So our approach in Australia has been based on research and modelling commissioned by the government from the eminent Doherty Institute, and that gives us a 4-phase pathway in terms of our response to COVID-19 and our progression through and out of the restrictions that have been in place. We are on the way to vaccinating Australians to a level which will give us the confidence to begin the sort of reopening that will enable students to return in phases 3 and then in phase 4, a much more open environment for international travel, and that will include students. So I think, although it is frustrating, I understand, for both the individuals and for families, there is shared desire on both sides to see that travel resume between our countries as soon as it is safe to do so, and I look forward to being one of the people at the airport to welcome the first arrivals of Indian students coming back to Australia.
Thank you, Honourable Ministers. Thank you, guests. That brings us to the end of this special briefing. May I request you to remain seated as the delegation members leave the hall.